Well, hey. It's Wednesday night. Good evening, all you cool cats and kittens. It's your pal Jen Lou. We're going to talk a little true crime this evening. Hi. Hey, Heather, whatever. Hey, Nonstop Mom. Hey, Molson Man. How's everybody doing? Oh, hey, Cement Shoes. How you doing? Hope everybody's doing okay today. Mike. Guess what day it is? Happy hump day. Hey, Jennifer Bradford. What a week already, and we're only halfway through it. I don't know. My days are all the way messed up. I've ever since that dadgum that after party baby the what how do you say baby shower after party. I ain't been right. My days is all mixed up. I'm all discombobulated. I That's why I don't get invited out too much because I hardly ever go anywhere or go out and do stuff. Like obviously I do adulting things. That's not technically. It's not really going anywhere. You know what I mean? Um, but I can't get back right after. This is why I stay home because I can't get back to right after I get off the leash for a while. Just not able to do it. Um, but tonight, what I wanted to talk about is Tabitha, and I cannot. Hey, Corky, good to see ya. I cannot. I don't know. I can't understand what the prosecutor is calling her as far as her. It's because she's no longer a Wagner, obviously. She has a different name, and it's not her maiden name, I don't think. I think she's remarried, but I can't quite make out what she's referring to her as. But she's George Washington Wagner the Fourth's ex-wife. And yeah, Jennifer, were you? Hey, Mrs. M. Hey, Coolest Reviews. Coolest, I'm not getting your notifications. I saw you had a video and I didn't even know that I didn't get a notification for a premiere or anything. Are you don't have to say where you are exactly, but are you South Florida? Jennifer, were you in the path of Ian too? I didn't know that. I'm so sorry. That it was a scary time. Oh, you are in Sarasota? Oh, bless your heart, babe. You guys okay? Let me know if you need anything. Um, so it's funny that you say that, Cement Shoes, because the other day I was watching something and I started to almost comment the Lou does not abide, obviously, as a nod to the dude. But I started to comment that and then I was like, no, they took away your community posts. What? Do we need a petition? What should we do, Coolest Reviews? Do we need to rally? Because I'll rally. You, I'll send YouTube a strongly worded email. Don't think I won't do it, because I will. All right. So Tabitha, who is George Washington Wagner the Fourth's ex-wife, okay, mother to his son Bovine. Um, she testified. She spent quite a bit of time on the stand. And I had it on good authority. Spoiler alert. The good authority is Jennifer Bradford, who was completely correct when she said this. Hey, Utter Nutter, how you doing? Um, she, she said that the cross-examination was a mess. And she was right. I watched. I watched. But I will say this, and we're going to watch it. I will say that it, I didn't watch it all the way to the end, so I don't know if there was a rebuttal. I'm hoping there was, because there is a part um in her cross-examination testimony that should be rebutted, and she should have the opportunity to testify about it. But I don't want to be a spoiler alert. So I'm hoping that that's what happened. Yeah, Corky's, that is the best movie, The Big Lebowski. There's some really like just I only have like a handful of movies that I can watch over and over and over, and The Big Lebowski is one of them. Speaking of movies, it's come to my attention that Peacock will once again, the same day as it's released in theaters, be streaming Halloween Ends, October 14th. So, if you don't have Peacock, get Peacock, because whatever Peacock is charging is cheaper than a movie ticket. I know this because I did the maths a while back on something else, some other movie. I think it was The Black Phone, to be honest with you. But I did do the maths, and I will say this. Now, I may not be good at geography, and I may not be even good at geometry, okay? But I am good at the maths, just not geometry. Now, Nonstop Mom, I know you say nope, and I know you feel very strongly about it. I know you're not monkeying around because you typed in all caps, which means that you have made your decision and it is final. And I'm not going to try and convince you otherwise. I can't do geography or geometry, neither one of those things. Molson Man, I watched the trailer after you told me about it, and I forget what I was watching the other day, but they were talking about Pearl and how good it was. And yeah, see, Black Phone was good. It was really good. And first of all, here's the thing, going to the theater is more expensive. That is true. And although there is something to be said for movie theater popcorn, it is good. Y'all know me. Sometimes I have to be pausing because I need to have a cigarette break. Okay. The other day during the hurricane, you know what I did? I did the geekiest thing ever. Okay, so I've been really, really wrapped up in the Rings of Power, which if you have to be like a Lord of the Rings, a Hobbit, you have to be a fan of those movies, of the books. You just have to be. I mean, because this is like before both of those, right? So you sort of have to be into that type of movie. You have to be into that genre, as it were. Okay. So I was like, there were some things in there that caught my attention. And I was like, I'm going to go and rewatch the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Okay. So I take myself over to the HBO Maxes, and lo and behold, the HBO Maxes has all three of the extended versions of the movies. Okay. Now, I highly suggest, if you are a fan of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, that you make the commitment to watch all three of those extended cuts, because I learned some things about the characters that I had long ago forgotten. I probably knew when I read the books, but I read the books a long time ago. Like when I was a young Jen Lu, like a young Jen Lu, like 12, 13-year-old Jen Lu before high school. And so that any of that data had been long ago written over with new song lyrics, different movie quotes, all that kind of stuff. Plus, I did only go to school, like actually physically attend class like 2 or 3 times a week, and yet maintained a straight A average. So that information, the 2 or 3 days I was in class, I had to pay attention. So there you go. Let's see. So definitely go check those out. Now I will say this. Oh, Amelia, I hope you feel better, babe. I will say this. The Return of the King is 3 hours and 45 minutes. So you pretty much can't, you really can't, it's a commitment. All right. But it's absolutely freaking worth it. Sometimes when they put bonus features or bonus material in, you're like, well, this was pointless. For example, and George Lucas, you know that I admire you and I really love Star Wars and I really don't want to do this, but I must. The extended scene in the cantina with the sock. That whole deal, completely unnecessary. Didn't need it. It added nothing to the experience of the movie, and that's that. Hang on just a second. Okay. Yeah, so that was completely unnecessary. Now that part's going to be stuck in my head. Ugh. Anyway, back to what we're supposed to be talking about. So I did watch. I'm all the way caught up, and on the Rings of Power, and I do recommend it. I like it. It's getting it. It was slow in the beginning because it's having to lay the foundation, and you're kind of having to be reintroduced to certain characters. Okay. But it's building now. It's getting exciting. There's only like 2 episodes left. I think there's going to be 8 in total. Also, just while we're chit-chatting here, the other show I recommend is Game of Thrones, the new the House of the Dragon, because it's picking up. It's getting really, really good. It's kept me quite entertained. There was almost a deal breaker for me around the 4th episode. I was like, oh, I mean, I knew what was going to happen, but then, when how you can know something is going to have to be covered, but you are dreading that it's being covered. It was almost a deal breaker, but I decided to rally, and I was like, no. So that's what I decided to do. I liked it. It's very good. It's getting really good now. And yeah, Dahmer was one of Netflix's better series. Speaking of Dahmer, this Friday, wait, let me see. What is today? Today is the 5th. So Friday the 7th. Okay. Netflix is releasing their next installment. It's Joe Berlinger's series, Conversations with a Killer. It's going to be the Jeffrey Dahmer tapes. And I believe that these tapes, just from what I can see from the trailer, because, watch the trailer. But what I've gathered from the trailer is that it is some of the tapes that are going to be played are from his attorney, the female attorney. You can see her in some of the, hey, Kez Chick. Are from the you can see her in when I get I'll point her out to you guys when I finish do my next Dahmer thing, but it's the blonde female attorney. She's featured quite prominently in the trailer, and so I think a lot of the audio tapes come from her, and obviously she is released of her attorney-client privilege due to the fact that Jeffrey Dahmer is no longer alive. So that's that. Okay. Now let's get to what we were supposed to be getting to. Hold on a minute. So tonight we're going to watch the cross-examination of Tabitha George Wagner, the Washington Wagner the Fourth's ex-wife. But there is a part that I want you guys... Oh no, it's covered in this. All right. All right, hold on. All right, so the part that I'm going to start at is not... Oh, Jen, get your act together, lady. The part that I'm going to start at is not... it's at the very end of the direct examination, because she's reading the Facebook messages between she and Hannah Mae, and the prosecutor, I will say, did an excellent job in picking these specific messages for her to read, because I mean, she read a bunch of them, but how she did it, how she ended it, right? So she ended that direct testimony with Facebook messages between Tabitha and Hannah Mae that were like April 21st of 2016. So, like the night before Hannah Mae was unalived. Now, I will say this. When we get to the actual cross-examination, this is my moment. It is triggering. There are things that are discussed. So here you go. This is your one and only last trigger warning, because I can't remember the exact timestamp of where I was like, oh, I better warn people before I play this. So now there's your warning for this, just so you know, it's coming. Let me add this to the stream. All right. And let me push play. And I wish I could make sure the volume is up. She talks very softly. And unfortunately, as you can see, and what I will say, I noticed this time about this specific trial versus the other ones that Long Crime does. Long Crime usually breaks them. They will have the whole entire day uploaded, right? But then they break it down into parts. And it's in doing that allows the closed captions to work, but they don't do that in this one. So we're all on our own. So I'll be quiet, and you guys turn your earphones up or your earbuds up if you're using earbuds.
With what I read on Facebook, he loves you just the same. Hannah said he wanted me to move in with him, but I don't want to take things so fast. I mean, he accepts Kylie because I got pregnant around the first time we ever done anything, but I know who Kylie's sperm donor is. Her father is Corey, but DNA doesn't mean anything. I said, no, DNA don't mean nothing. My baby's sperm donor is a douche, but Christian is more than happy. In fact, he is happier than me, LOL, and that's like massively happy, LOL. Anywho, he is more than happy to be the baby's dad and help me raise him or her.
Okay, and then States Exhibit EE10, the very top, there's one line that finishes that conversation.
I've been keeping up with that Molson man. Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
Hannah said, Corey's great in every single way. He loves Sophia, even though she's a brat. He's great with her. He's raised a baby girl with Down syndrome, and then her mom left him and took her after she swore she would never do that. So he's kind of worried that I would do the same thing, but I'm not going to do that to him.
Okay. And Ms. Clater, the last part, or the first part of that conversation in States Exhibit
Hey,
EE9,
Aussie girl
and then the
Jen,
last
how you
part of it at the
doing?
top of EE10, can you tell us if that accurately reflects a conversation that you had with Hannah Roden on April 14th of 2016 via Facebook Messenger?
Yes.
And again, same question, did anybody have your permission to view your Facebook Messenger in any way at that time?
No.
Okay, going to the I'm here, I think it's April 16th of 2016.
I said, I'm here.
Oh, I might have
George
rewound
and
too
I-
far. Hold on.
I really truly want me and Corey to last and grow old. Corey has a house and etc. Jake is never moving from there, but I know Jake hasn't been with anyone since we split up.
Hold
He
on.
said he doesn't. Jake is never moving, but I don't see it happen. I have my days where I want to. I do. I hate being me. And I said, sorry for the novel, lol. Hannah said, I have my days where I want to go back.
Okay, now let me just explain something really quick that I forgot to explain before, just in case you're only watching what I play or not up to to if you're not caught all the way caught up or if you've missed anything. So there was a period of time when Tabitha and Hannah Mae lived with Jake and George at the Wagner's home. Okay. And at one point, they were actually not close. They were actually sort of like adversaries because I guess best way to explain it is it's from the testimony. What it seemed like to me is that um, Hannah was like the new shiny girl, I guess. And she sort of took any attention and any love, or love is probably not the right word. Any of the accolades or praise was sort of lavished on Hannah and not on Tabitha anymore. And so it's a very, very complicated situation. But at the same time, the girls, I think that they came together after they had left George and Jake, because it's one of those things, like it's like trying to explain the shenanigans that go on the YouTube's streets to somebody who doesn't realize that YouTube is far bigger than just music videos or a few how-to videos. You know what I mean? If you're trying, you can't really explain these YouTube streets and the things that people get up to on here to somebody who's never witnessed it. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. And I think that after they got away from Jake and George, I think the girls were like, they understood each other. You know, they had that comment, they had something in common, you know? Well, yeah, nobody can really adequately explain the YouTube. So it'd be a bit like trying to explain Watts Island. You know, somebody's if I were to refer to the Watts case and I use the term Watts Island, right, to somebody who is not familiar with the case or the island or the YouTubes, they would be like, "What are you talking about?" All right, here we go.
because that's my whole teenage years with Jake, something that nobody could ever replace. Jake always asks me when I'm coming home, so does Billy. But I don't see it happening. I really truly want me and Corey to last and grow old. Corey has a house and etc. Jake is never moving from there, but I know Jake hasn't been with anyone since we split up. He said he doesn't have the time and he only wants one person. I said, yeah, I could see him saying that and it being true, but you have to do what's right for you and what makes you happy, same as I do. Hannah said he wants a DNA test. Yeah, I was shocked when we split up too. It was my call, but I was scared. I had the treat over my shoulders. I think I'm supposed to say threat. Sorry.
It's okay.
Over my shoulders. If I ever tried leaving, nobody would find me. And I seen what happened the night you left, and I know what would happen if they would have gotten you back to the house.
Okay. And again, it does continue on here. I can give you that as well, but is that a conversation that you had with Hannah Roden on April 21st, 2016
Yes.
through Facebook Messenger, correct?
Yes.
And did anybody other than yourself have permission to access those messages?
No.
So the words that she just read,
And you
Kezchik,
talked about
hold on.
if it was your house.
The words that she just read, that she just finished reading, are from Hannah. Those are Hannah's words, where Hannah is acknowledging that she feels threatened by Jake and the Wagner family with respect to her oldest daughter Sophie, and that even if they had never made a verbal threat to her, which Jake did, according to Hannah, she witnessed what occurred the night that Tabitha did leave, and that was enough to scare Hannah and make her aware of what this family was capable of. Now, do I think she thought that they were going to go this far? Bless her little heart. No, I mean, she's only 19, for crying out loud. She's just a kid.
You could do things the way you wanted. Was that different when you were in the Wagner's home?
Yes.
Okay. And was there specific comments about that, who owned the house mattered, basically?
Yes.
Watts Island is bad. Wilson, man, but trying to explain to
And
how bad Watts Island is to somebody who doesn't know
when she's
anything
talking
about Watts
the night
Island
you
or
left,
the
is that the
YouTubes.
night that you left and got and hid and got on your bicycle and never went back?
Yes.
Hannah, it's been marked as State's Exhibit EE11. That's a continuation. Okay. And if you can look at that, do you recognize that conversation?
Yes.
And is that a conversation that you had with Hannah Roden on April 21st, a continuation of the conversation that you were just reading to us.
Yes.
Hey guys, if you haven't already, could you give me a
If you could go ahead and tell us what it's.
thumbs up on the stream?
I
I'd greatly
said, yeah, I
appreciate
can
it.
only imagine. I mean, if George would have just let me go outside to cool off a bit, then we would probably still be married. All I wanted was 5 minutes to cry outside alone. I do understand Angela not giving me Vine to hug because he don't need them bad vibes and such, and I do thank you for taking him upstairs,
Thanks,
but all I
Cass.
wanted was 5 minutes because I wasn't in a good mood because I was trying to clean the kitchen up, but Vine was awake and I was trying to get him back to sleep. Then she pulled up and seen I didn't get it cleaned up yet. Then George took her side and said that he never heard Vine crying. But George was outside working and Vine didn't cry all loud like he was hurt. It was just a little, hey, I'm alone kind of cry. Hannah said, yeah, that night was crazy. I said, then Angela told George she was gonna get the gun, so I walked past Jake and hid under the truck for a few, then snuck out and got my bike, then went to the gas station to call my mom, then y'all pulled up and Angela told him that I drug Vine around the house by his legs. Hannah said, I didn't know that she said that. I was stressed that night and no one really slept that night because they thought you was gonna come with your mom down there and was waiting for it. And they was waiting for it.
And again, the they in that conversation is,
George, Jake, Billy, and Angela.
and is that a conversation that you had with Hannah Roden on April 21st of 2016
Yes.
via Facebook?
Yes.
And did anybody else ever have your permission to view those messages?
No.
And is that the last conversation that you had with Hannah Roden?
Yes.
And Ms. Claytor, obviously, those conversations you and Hannah are talking about the experience of living with the Wagners, correct?
Yes.
And I guess the violence and the threats that both of you experienced there,
Yes.
and the controlling nature of the family.
Yes.
Where's the defense? These are leading questions, although I'm glad they're not objecting, but they should be.
And also your efforts to see your son, correct?
Yes.
And Hannah's concerns regarding them also trying to take her daughter away from her, correct?
Yes.
And you mentioned in there at some point that, again, and you testified about this previously, that you had voiced that you wanted to live apart from the rest of the family, just so it would just be you and George together with your son. And you indicated that George's response was that you're a farming family and you all have to live together, basically.
Yes.
Okay. To your knowledge, did he ever move out of their home, or did he continue to live with them?
As far as I know, he continued to live with them.
And when you did get visits with your son, Bullvine, during the year of, I guess, 2016, part of 2015, I guess, would it be at that Peterson Road
Yes.
address? Okay. And would other members of his family be present there?
Yes.
Here comes Alice, y'all. She's all spiced up.
And you indicated basically in that last situation that George had said that he hadn't heard Bullvine crying, basically perhaps questioning whether or not Bullvine actually woke up as you had described. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us if when you had problems, various problems with George?
Oh, they are, Jen.
usually
Yes,
take
they are,
your
babe.
side or the side of his
Absolutely.
mother?
He would always take his mother's side.
And I believe you indicated when you were riding your bike to the station, it was Jake and George who pulled up alongside of you.
Yes.
And then when you got to the station and they,
Sorry.
She's been leading
They're
this
leading questions. I don't
this
know if we react
witness for
to
the
those.
last 87 hours. Stop it. Well, I put up the phone so she can't get
It
to
wasn't a
that.
leading question, so I'll sustain the objection to it.
and then when you got to the station, who was in the, and the, they
So I think
returned,
you guys are
who was
safe.
all in that vehicle at that time?
George, Jake, Billy.
Honestly, Mac
Angela,
is the one.
and
She's playing with Mac.
Ms. Wagner, we've been talking, or Ms. Wagner, that was your former name, sorry.
Look
We've
at her
been talking,
face.
Ms. Clater, we have been talking a lot today about
Poor
George,
thing.
Jake, Angela, and Billy. First of all, do you recognize the person that you've described as George Wagner in the courtroom today?
yes.
Sorry?
We stipulate she can recognize her accent.
I was also going to
So
show her,
Well, you're stipulating then that
I
the
accept the
witness here is
stipulation.
identifying the defendant as George Wagner.
That's correct.
Yeah, but you did it in a snarky way,
Reverend
counselor.
Shelton
We
was
heard you. That was
Sorry.
shady.
I was also going to show her photos of the rest of the family. Do you want us to do that too, or do you want me to have her identify?
Jeez.
Stipulation is denied her.
Okay. Specifically, Jake, Angela, and Billy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What was that?
I said particularly Jake, Angela, and Billy,
We're stipulating what?
that she can identify them as well.
That's correct.
The jury is so advised.
Okay. Perfect.
And shall accept that stipulation as fact that was established by evidence here in court.
Wonderful. Could you get the defense attorney to get to on the mic when he raises his objections? This has been an ongoing issue and I don't appreciate it. I'd appreciate
The defense may
your
cross-examine.
swift and immediate attention to this matter. Who could be snarky to you, Molson, man? You're a treasure. Come on, man. Get up there. Now, I'm going to tell y'all before he gets up there. Hang on just a second. I'm going to pause it. No, I'm not going to tell y'all. Just listen. Because I have commentary and I much rather save my commentary for no worries, Aussie Jen. No worries. Just glad to have you, babe. I'm going to save my commentary for the important parts.
Good afternoon, Ms. Clater.
Clater, I think is her last
Hi,
name.
my name's Rick Nash. I'm going to ask you some questions. It's kind of going to be based on the answers that you just gave yesterday and today, okay?
Okay.
If you need a moment to think about a question, or if I'm talking too fast, just let me know if you need to take a moment, okay?
Okay.
Or if you don't understand what I'm asking you, just let me know, because I want to make sure you understand what I'm asking, all right?
Okay.
All right. So the first thing I want to ask you about is when you testified today and yesterday regarding your meeting and living arrangements with the Wagners. You recall those questions, right?
Yes.
So let's go to when you were introduced to George. How old were you?
I'll be right back, but I'm in chat,
around
so
11, 12 years old.
Okay. And that meeting actually happened at the Flying W Farm. Is that right? How old were you?
Yes.
So let's go to when you were introduced to George. How old were you?
I was around 11, 12 years old.
Okay. And that meeting actually happened at the Flying W Farm. Is that right?
Yes.
And do you recall that meeting being set up by Robin Wagner?
Yes.
Okay. And in fact, your mother had worked at Crystal Springs at that time, right?
Yes.
And that meeting was between you and George. Jake was there and your sister Trish. Is that right?
Yes.
And I believe would I be correct in saying that George and Trish were supposed to be introduced to each other, you and Jake, because of your similar ages? Is that right?
Yes.
And the way things worked, it was just you and George that had an attraction, right?
Yes.
And I believe on that day you guys met, you guys went fishing there at the big pond on the Flying W.
Yes.
And that's something you enjoy to do is fish, right?
Yes.
In fact, the boys had rode their ATVs over to the Flying W farm. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And that's what you and George had done later that day, ride ATVs or four-wheelers.
Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but before you left that day, you and your sister, you guys had plans to meet again the following weekend and do this again, right?
Yes.
And you were 11 years old at that time. Is that right?
Around 11 or 12, yes.
Yeah. And these meetings with George and Jake, these weekend meetings, they lasted maybe 2 or 3 weekends in a row. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
And after about 3 weekends, you and your sister stayed all night at the Wagner home, right?
Yes.
And that's the Wagner home there on Bethel Hill.
Yes.
And that's that home that you had to follow that long driveway all the way to the top of the hill, right?
Yes.
And that's real close to Crystal Springs, right?
Yes.
That's where your mother worked.
Yes.
Yes, your mother's Tess, right?
Yes.
Okay. And when you and your sister would stay overnight at the Wagner home, you stayed in Jake's room, is that right?
No, I stayed in George's.
Okay. Do you recall initially staying in Jake's room with your sister?
I think we did the first maybe 1 or 2 nights.
Okay. Eventually, Trish stopped coming or stopped going over to the Wagner home, and it was just you going, right?
Yes.
Because she had no interest in Jake, right?
Yes.
You were interested in George, and so you would continue to go there to the Wagner home, right?
Yes.
And eventually, you just stayed there, right?
Yes.
Okay. And we spoke about school and where you went to school, and I understand you went to the vocational school, right?
Yes.
But that was much later. That was when you would have been a late teen, right?
It was my 11th and 12th grade year.
Yeah. But before that, you were homeschooled.
Yes.
And Angela Wagner actually offered or did some of your homeschooling with you, right?
Yes, I did some of my schoolwork as she was teaching the boys theirs.
Yeah. And in fact, you stayed at the Wagner home for about a year, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so could you tell us, when we asked when you moved in with the Wagners, actually when the prosecutor asked you yesterday and today, you said you didn't move into your senior year. Do you recall that answer?
Yes.
But yet here we are talking about you moving in when you're 11 years old. Could you explain to us why you didn't mention that yesterday and this morning?
Because I didn't technically move in. I
Okay,
didn't change my address.
okay, so it makes a difference if you hadn't changed your address as an 11-year-old, is that right?
Yes,
Okay. But nevertheless, you agree with me that you were living there at 11?
technically, yes.
Okay. In fact, you ended up moving a dresser into the Wagner home with your clothing, right?
A little plastic stand that had like 3 little drawers in it.
Yeah. And again, this is just on Bethel, right next to the Crystal Springs nursing home, right?
Mhm,
And
yes,
and your mother still worked there,
yes.
but your mother never came and picked you up, is that right?
No, yes, it is right.
Okay. Now, eventually, you ended up actually sleeping in the same bed with George.
Yes,
And you still would have been about 11 years old, right?
yes,
And so yesterday, you talked about Angela Wagner having this conversation and saying something about you shouldn't have sex unless you're trying to have a baby, or sex is only for babies. You remember saying that, right?
yes.
So we're clear, are you saying that conversation happened when you were 11 or 12 years old, sleeping in George's bed?
No, we had that conversation whenever we started dating again as older teens.
Okay, all right. So just so we all understand what you're saying, that Angela never said anything about premarital sex or sex at all until you were late teens, right?
Yes,
And never said anything about sex, even though you were still sleeping in George's bed as an 11 or 12-year-old, right?
yes,
Okay. If my calculation is correct, at 11 years old, that would have been about 2003 for you. That be right?
I'm horrible with math, but it sounds about right.
Okay. And then in 2004, you moved your belongings, or you were no longer staying in the Wagner home, right?
Yes,
And that's because George broke up with you.
yes,
You guys attended a church, and there was a girl there that he had an eye for, right?
I suppose he just told me he didn't want to be a boyfriend anymore.
Okay. And that's when you started staying with your mother, Tex.
Yes,
But during that year, that you between 11 and 12, when you were dating George, you would sometimes go home, right?
yes,
And then freely just come back to the Wagner home, right?
yes,
So we heard some testimony about you not being able to leave. And maybe it's just me, but it sounded like you didn't want to be there. But yet you freely came back even at that young age, right?
as a child, yes.
Okay. So then in 2004, when you had to move out of the Wagner home because George broke up with you, you ended up getting back with George about a year later. Is that right?
No, there was like 6 years in between us dating when we were little kids compared to when we were older.
Okay, you're certain you did not make another move back into the Wagner home?
I didn't move in. I think we had dated for maybe like a week or two,
Okay.
and I had spent maybe 1 or 2 nights there.
Okay. And then it would be about, well, you talked about going to the vocational school. At that time, you were actually enrolled in a local school district, right?
Yes,
Which would have been Northwest School District.
yes,
And you were taking vocational courses at the VOTEC.
All right, so I'm going to pause it right there because obviously this needs to be addressed. I don't know what George's attorney was intending to do when he what he is intending to elicit from Tabitha in the minds of the how he's trying to change or have the jurors perceive Tabitha due to this testimony, because to be quite honest with you, this testimony does not make Tabitha look bad. If anything, first of all, she was a child, okay? And I really didn't appreciate, excuse me, his tone when he was asking her about sleeping in George Wagner's bed at 11 years old. Again, she was 11 years old, and there were 2 other adults in that home, plus her mother, who allowed it. So Tabitha herself is not responsible. She was a kid. And to be quite honest with you, if he was hoping to paint Tabitha in a negative light by getting this testimony, just this portion of it, because there's several things that occur after this, and we're going to have to, I'm going to break them down. But if that's what he was intending to do, to paint her in a bad light, he failed miserably. If anything, if I were sitting on the jury, it would further instill in me that the belief that the Wagners moved as a single unit and that they recruited for their family. I don't know another way to say it, quite honestly. What other intention would you have to introduce an 11-year-old to your 14 or 15-year-old son? It wouldn't be me. I have a granddaughter, right? And Dr. B's sister has a little boy, and we have joked, Dr. B's sister and I, 11 billion times that we're going to, it's going to be an arranged marriage so that we can be family for real, like on paper, not just in our hearts. It's a joke. We would never actually do that, and I'm not I'm not making a commentary on an arranged marriage. People, that's not the point here. It's the age. 11 is young, number one. And why were they spending so much time over there at night? I mean, it's fine. Okay. Fine. Maybe they all got along great and they're all playmates, whatever, and spend the night. But why allow, it would not be me. My son would not be having a sleepover with a girl. I don't give a rat's fat kneecap. Now, if they were young, 4 or 5, would I let? Yeah, I would, but I wouldn't let them sleep in the same bed. That's ridiculous. And that's and I understand that. Jen, I agree. I think that you're very correct, that's an excellent point, that is a part of it, that he is trying to show that Tabitha didn't want to be at her own home. And I also wonder, but at the same time, it also, that was a dicey proposition. He took a real roll of the dice, because quite honestly, yeah, it seemed like, no, she didn't want to be at her own home, right? But she also didn't want to be she thought it was going to be better at the Wagners, and she learned very quickly that was absolutely not the case. And so I think that if it would have been me, I wouldn't have asked that question. I'm going to mute, and we're going to get back to it. Alice has done served me with a full no-knock warrant and opened the door, and I don't want to you guys to be distracted by what's going on in the living room, which is TV watching. But anyway, here we go.
Lucasville, is that right?
Yes.
All right. But about that time, right before your senior year, that's when you and George got back together, right?
Yes.
In fact, you guys had taken a trip to Florida in July of 2011. Does that sound right?
Yes,
And he proposed to you on that trip to Florida.
yes,
And you said yes.
yes,
Okay. After you graduated in, I'm assuming May, but it would have been in the year of 2012, you had a graduation party, right?
yes,
And George went to your house, or
yes.
where the graduation party was being held, right?
Oh yeah, Molson, man. Alice runs the show.
And while we're on the subject of George coming to your house on that time, when you guys were together, he would go to your house for holidays, right? Or visit your mothers or your family?
No,
Okay.
She
Well, you
pushes.
eventually
Oh, hold on, I'll
wed
tell you.
in July.
So if she wants in and you don't have the door shut where it's latched, I'm telling you guys, you ought to see it. She just like shoulder checks it. It's audible. I'm surprised y'all didn't hear it. She also, that's how she gets in the bedroom. If she wants outside, like outside of in the backyard, you know how back doors, the French doors, they have the individual panes, right? She will hit, there's the parts that separate the panes, you know what I'm talking about, the little wood pieces. She smacks those with her paw up against the glass. She's a freaking maniac, I'm telling you. And cats do have hands. They don't have opposable thumbs, but I have seen Alice use her hands just with, just like anybody else would use their hands. She just doesn't have a thumb, so she can't turn shit. That's the only difference. I saw her give Max some skippity paps the other day that sounded like a pimp slap. I don't know how else to explain it.
Of 2012.
yes,
Okay. And
Good night, Corky. Thanks for
that
being
was
here.
a wedding there at the Mission, I believe. Is that right? By the Crystal Springs?
yes,
All right. And was that your decision to get married?
yes,
All right.
That's right. All hail
You
Alice.
love George. This is who you wanted to be with, right?
yes,
And you had spent a lot of time with him.
yes,
Okay.
She was a kid.
You were under no compulsion to agree to marry him. You were free to say no, right?
yes.
Okay.
Hi, Shamina. It did. It sounded like I don't know how else to explain it. Now that song's gonna be in my head. That only want me for my pimp juice.
And after
Ooh,
you guys got married, you moved back into the Wagner home, right?
No, I had moved back in before we got married.
Okay, that's right. During your senior year, right?
Yes,
And at that time, you didn't have a car,
no,
and George would take you every morning to school, right?
he would drive me down to the end of, I can't remember the name of the road, where the bus could pick me up.
oh, such
And
chivalry.
while you
Drove
were
you
at
to the bus
school,
stop.
you and George had some issues because you were then seeing another guy
Oh,
after school.
here we
right?
go.
Yes,
Now we're gonna get into it, okay?
And
You know that
George
Backyard
found out
Again
about
song?
that,
yes,
I'm gonna
and
rewind
he
it.
worked with you,
yes,
and you guys moved forward. All right.
Okay, you know that Backyard Again song? Into the thick of it. That's where we're about to be. Into the thick of it.
And George found out about that,
yes,
and he worked with you,
yes,
and you guys moved forward and got married, right?
yes,
After this marriage, you were free to leave the Wagner home, right?
for a little while.
Yeah, and when you were free to leave, because I heard some testimony yesterday and today that made it sound like you weren't free to leave.
I was free to leave for a little while.
Okay. And in fact, we know you were free to leave because you, after you were married, you were visiting your best friend, right?
Yes,
Whitney is her name, is that right?
yes,
And you would go to Whitney's house a lot
yes.
and even stay all night there?
During school, yes, I stopped once I graduated.
And so, and George was okay with that, right?
Yes,
In fact, nobody was telling you you can't go to Whitney's. Nobody was telling you you can't leave, right?
they didn't like the idea, but I did it anyways.
You did it anyways because you have that ability and right, right?
Yes,
Okay. But there was a particular reason you liked going to Whitney's a lot, right?
she was my best friend, yes.
Yeah, was there anything else there?
Oh
Not at
dear.
the time.
Okay.
Here we go.
Well, so you said not at the time. You're very particular about that answer, which leads me to ask, was there a time that you wanted to go there more often than just seeing Whitney?
No,
All right. And who's Whitney's father? Do you know?
All right. Now I'm going to tell you guys this because I can't keep my mouth shut. I'm sorry to anybody in chat now, and I'm sorry to anybody on the replay. I can't keep my mouth shut. I got to speak. Okay. I understand, and I know you guys understand that it is the defense, it's the opposing counsel, whoever's witness it is, on cross-exam to impeach the witness's direct testimony. We all know that, right? But I don't like the way he is doing this at all. This is a very, very, this is not the way I would go about doing it. Okay, you've had her direct testimony has just ended with the last conversation that she had with Hannah Mae Roden, likely less than 24 hours, because I can't remember what time they said, but it was less than 24 hours before she was unalived. And one of the last things that Hannah said, and that Tabitha and Hannah said to one another, was they talked about, they had wished that it worked out with Jake and George because those were the fathers of their oldest children, and they felt guilty about not being with the fathers of their older children. But they also recognized that it was essentially a toxic environment in that house. They both agreed that Angela is the one who ruled with an iron fist and on one hand and a freaking hammer in the other, right? And so they had to bounce for themselves and for their children, right? Only Tabitha didn't make it out. She wasn't as lucky in that respect because she didn't get to make it out with her son. And Hannah did get to make it out with her daughter. Unfortunately, she didn't make it out with her life. You know what I mean? So then you think that it's a good idea to call this girl up. She is young. Okay, we're talking about she was probably barely old enough to actually get married without parental permission, like meaning she probably had just turned 18 when they got married. Okay. And then you're going to go into this other part of her life, which is only going to make her more sympathetic to the jury. Or I'm very annoyed. All right, here we go.
yes.
And who is her father?
Cecil Smith.
Cecil Smith. And how well do you know Cecil Smith?
Very well.
Okay. And Cecil also goes by the name Jay, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And at some point, you had some revelation to tell George about Jay, right?
Yes.
And what was that?
What was the reason?
Well, yeah, what was the revelation? What did you have to tell him?
I had told him that I had cheated on him
Okay,
with Jay.
right. And in fact, this was more than just one occasion, right?
Yes.
And how old is Jay?
About 25, 30 years older.
Okay,
me.
you were about 17 maybe at the time?
No, I didn't get back with George until I was about 18, 19.
Okay, so then you would have been about 18, 19, and tell me again, how much older was he than you?
About 25, 30 years older.
And it's fair to say that you have very fond feelings for Jay,
Oh
right?
my
Yes, I
God.
Now, there was a reason that you had to tell George that you had been having sex.
I'm going to object to this line of questioning. I don't see what I'm saying.
I think they opened the door on this topic.
Can we approach?
Go ahead and approach. And while y'all approach and discuss this debacle, I'm going to have my say. First of all, what are you doing, sir? That I don't give a rat's fat kneecap if they opened the door and rolled out the red carpet. You're taking an awfully risky move here by pointing out that she is 18 or 19 years old, which legally is an adult, but we've all been 18 or 19 before, and we all know that that is not much. I mean, you're not as mature as somebody who's 25 or 30 years older than you. All right, so let's do the math. 20 years old would be 30, so 30, 35, 40-year-old guy is hooking up with an 18 or 19, and I don't even like to use that term, hooking up, because it's gross. The power dynamic there is all the way askew. Okay? This was ridiculous. This is not, how does, and this is what I don't like when they do this to women. How does who she slept with make her a credible or not credible witness? Why don't you why don't you ask her about the things that she actually testified to? Why don't you, if you're trying to see, this is where the problem lies for him. Okay. If he were to impeach her on her testimony, for example, of Angela Wagner, right? It's a dicey proposition there, because if he tries to say, well, weren't there times when Angela was good to you, right? That's problematic later on, and she agrees that's going to be problematic later on down the road, because he is trying to separate George from the rest of the Wagners. Okay. And so we can't really do that. But I understand that. I understand that he's wrong, but this is not the way to go. I would have much rather seen him take a chance. He could have asked, did George intervene sometimes when Angela was, hey, Jody? Yes, exactly. Nonstop. It's incredibly condescending, and it's just very persnickety, and I don't appreciate it. And then, he could have perhaps impeached her testimony by talking about the good times with George, although that doesn't completely impeach the testimony, right? Because we all know that studies show that there's the good times, then there's the abuse, and there's the honeymoon period, and then there's the abuse again, right? In those kind of relationships. So, but anything would have been better than this. This is ridiculous and disgusting. Let me fast forward for this.
All right, so you may continue your question.
Thank you, Judge. Despite these problems that you had brought into the marriage, George was willing to work with you on that, right?
Yes.
And although he was willing to work with you, and you gave him your word that you would stop this behavior, right?
Yes.
But you didn't do that. You continued
Yes.
this affair.
No.
Okay. So your son, he was born in July of 2013, right?
Yes.
Do you recall a trip to Cabela's in May of 2013 in Dundee, Michigan?
What year?
2013, May? Do you recall a call from your doctor?
Yes.
Okay. And you had a conversation, you picked up the phone and you spoke with the doctor, right?
Yes.
And as a result of that conversation, you had a discussion with George about your infidelity again. Is that right?
That's actually whenever he found out.
Okay. All right.
He didn't find out until after the doctor's appointment or the phone call.
Okay. And so going into giving birth to your son, you and George were having issues about your marriage based on your infidelity, right?
Somewhat.
And George had questions about whether he was actually the father of this child.
Yes.
All right. And you would agree with me that after this, George is going to have some concerns about you and your faithfulness to him, right?
Yes.
And you wanted to continue this relationship with George.
Yes.
It was an opportunity for you to walk out if you no longer wanted to be with George, right?
Yes.
Because he was actually saying that this relationship is over at that point. But you wanted it to continue, right?
Yes.
In fact, it's you and your efforts to continue this relationship that gave George your cell phone, any passwords you had to social media, in a way to ease his mind that you would no longer cheat on him, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you were asked a lot of questions about whether you gave your password. to
Oh
your father.
my
You said
God, I
no to
can't
all
believe
those
he's
questions.
going down this
Do
road.
you recall that?
Yes, I did.
Did you forget about that?
No, I did not.
Okay, so then why didn't you tell us when you were asked whether you gave any passwords to anybody?
Because it's a different Facebook account.
I'm sorry, it's
It
what?
was a different Facebook account.
A different Facebook account.
When I left him, I made a new one.
Okay. And in fact, when we talk about different Facebook accounts, you were given, looks like some screenshots of a Facebook account you said you did not create, right?
Yes.
But you have created Facebook accounts with your picture, but a different name, right?
Different maiden name or different
Okay.
last name. Yes.
How about, did
Let
you
me just
ever
stop you
create
right
a-
there. First of all, sir, again, she's what, 18, 19 years old. At this point, she's got a newborn. She's had bovine. Okay. She has some high school education, which was mainly homeschooling, vocational training, which I don't even know that she completed that because I was a little fuzzy about that. But bought no vehicle, no way to support herself independently, right? And so, in an effort to save her relationship, she turned over her phones and gave her passwords, yada 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 yada. So basically, sorry, nonstop mom. I don't, sorry. So basically, she's gives up her cell phone, her passwords, etc., right? In an effort to salvage this relationship with the father of her child, okay? Because they did have a DNA test. George is the father, by the way. But somehow she is so her not being allowed to leave is her fault. Her not being allowed to go anywhere unchaperoned is her own fault. She is to blame for the way that family treated her. Get the fuck out of here.
Facebook account under the name of Jane Deere?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so I just asked you, if you had, and you said yes, but with a different last name. You just said that, right?
Yes,
Did you just forget about Jane Deere, or were you waiting to see if I would ask you about
I
that?
actually did forget about that one.
Okay. Now, there was some testimony about when you gave birth to Bullvine, about how your family wasn't there, right?
Yes,
In fact, from what I'm hearing, your family wasn't there a lot of times. They didn't visit you on Bethel, right?
they weren't allowed.
So, but remember, I asked you whether you went home back and forth, and you said yes, right?
Yeah, when
I
she was a
child,
kid.
yes.
Okay, all right. So you're saying that stopped as you got older?
Yes.
Okay.
Shmita.
After giving birth to your son, and it was later, are you satisfied that George is the father of that child?
I knew he was.
Okay, all right. But there was some testing that was done, is that right?
Yes, there was, but it wasn't my choice.
Okay.
There was
Now,
some
your mother
testing
did
done.
not
It's
like
just a
George. Is that
test.
safe to say?
Jesus fuck.
Yeah.
Okay. And would it tell me about any conversations you were heard or part of that your mother had the idea of bringing another Mel to the delivery room to have his name put on the birth certificate?
All right, I'm gonna stop you right there. Turn your earbuds down. Nonstop, Mom. Okay. So, first of all, that question makes absolutely zero sense. Okay? There doesn't need to be another male in attendance in the labor and delivery room in order for this man to put this is just preposterous. That plan makes zero sense. Okay? Just absolutely zero sense. And I wanted to point something out too. So remember how I was talking earlier, about this. They were introduced at 11 years old. So earlier today, this morning's testimony, if you go back and watch my live from this morning, they had a special agent from the Ohio Bureau BCI, Crime Scene Investigation. Okay. So this but his specific role at the BCI was to work. He worked the drug task force essentially. All right. So there was an interview with Billy Wagner, which is George and Jake's father. All right, and they were sitting in the special agent's truck or vehicle, and they were talking. Okay, and one of the things that Billy Wagner, among the many things that he said, which I encourage all of you guys to go back and listen to that audio, because he snitched on everybody, all the people. I'm not on his family, obviously, but anybody that had any connection whatsoever to the pot business over there in Ohio, he was ratting out. All right, he's probably in CP tonight. Even he ratted on law enforcement. All right, so anyway, go back and listen to that. But one of the things that he said is he talked about his parents um, set him up financially. So if if his family, his meaning if Billy's mom and dad set up Billy to be financially stable, then it would make sense that that family was known in that county for being financially stable, which explains, although I don't agree with it, but the appellation, it's just different, okay? But it does explain why there was this situation where they were, um, I guess, trying to arrange some type of relationship, and I'll just leave it at that. All right, here we go. All right, Nonstop Mom, turn your earbuds up again. I'm muting.
Call that conversation?
No.
Okay. So if your mother said that happened, or if she had messaged somebody on Facebook, you're totally unaware of that, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, at some point, you got the idea that George was restricting you from seeing your mother and your sisters. Is that right?
Yes.
And when we spoke just a little bit ago about Cecil, isn't it true that when you, well, before I go there, one of the things you like to do is go fishing, is that right?
Yes.
And you would go with your mother sometimes, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so I just saw you look up and roll your eyes. You know where I'm going with these questions?
Yes, I do.
And does this deal with a fishing trip you and your mother took to Lake White?
Yes, it does.
You want to tell the jurors what I'm about to ask you?
Go right
I
ahead.
object to this style of
Okay.
badgering, frankly.
All right. So you and your mother told George you were going fishing at Lake White. Is that right?
Yes.
And I believe George was going somewhere else and he asked you to go along and you declined, right?
Yes.
And it was during that trip that you were with your mother that you had another visit with Cecil, right?
Yes, but my mother didn't know about it. That was not my plans that day. My plans were to go fishing with my mother.
Okay. And so while you say your mother didn't, I guess, have a part in it, your mother, though, was aware and enabled you to cheat on George.
No.
So you're telling us that your mother was unaware of your relationship with Jay.
Yes.
Okay. And she never set this up or
No.
arranged for you two to be together.
Hey, Yvonne, how you
Nope.
doing, babe? Good to see ya.
And speaking of your mother,
Oh God, here we go.
you testified a little bit about
Brace
the
yourselves.
unfortunate
Trigger warning.
occasion that you're a victim of sexual abuse, right?
Yes.
And that would have been before, you would have been a very small child, less than 11, right?
Yes.
Prior to moving into the Wagner home.
Yes.
And the perpetrator, the person who victimized you, that's Dave, right?
Yes.
And Dave is your mother's husband.
Was. He's dead now.
He's dead. And when did he die?
About 5 years ago, I think.
Okay. And your mother was aware of the things that Dave did to you, right?
Yes.
And not only did he do these awful things to you, but he did them to your sisters.
Yes.
In fact, the state had given you some Facebook messages you had with Hannah where you discussed George bringing this up and asking you about this or giving you problems about this, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so there was a time actually that, let me ask, Travis Turner. Do you know who Travis Turner is?
Your Honor, I'm going to object if we are just, I'm going to object to this one question.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll withdraw that
Mhm.
question.
Yes, Jennifer, I agree.
Ma'am, was there an occasion where you and George and the rest of your family met with your mother at your sister Renee's to discuss Dave?
Yes.
And
Excuse me.
was there an individual there by the name of Travis Turner?
I think. I'm not sure if he was there or not.
Okay. Would you agree with me that the purpose of this meeting was to do something about Dave, to turn him into law enforcement?
Yes.
And had that happened, your mother may get in trouble as well. Would you agree with me?
Yes.
And your mother did not want anybody to tell on Dave, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, and George is there. He's present for all this conversation, right?
Yes.
What a
Now,
fucking
when you
asshole.
left the Wagner home, and we'll get to this more in depth, but that's where you went, was the home with Dave, right?
Yes.
And George did not want his little boy living in the same home as Dave. Is that what he told you?
Yes.
Okay. That seems like a pretty rational thing to not want your child around a child molester, right?
Yes.
You don't,
All right. Earbuds down. Turn the volume down because I got to speak. I can't say this. I got to speak. I can't just let this go. Well played, you fucking buffoon. So what you did was you basically victim blamed the shit out of her, made her seem like a wanton woman, and then trot out her essay as a child in front of the jury. So wouldn't that then explain how wouldn't that explain Cecil? Would that not explain her being unfaithful because she doesn't understand what a healthy relationship looks like? You fucking idiot. What a piece of fucking shit he is. I cannot believe that he thought this was a good fucking route to go down. What a piece of fucking shit he is. I wish they'd pan over to George so you can see his smug leather vest wearing Wrangler jeans with no crease looking ass. Ugh.
fault George for not wanting his son to be there, right?
What is it?
You don't fault him for not wanting his son to be there in that
No,
home,
she
right?
didn't at all, Jennifer,
That was a
at
no?
all. Oh, I think the jury is absolutely
was a
going to
no. I don't
understand
blame him.
this, Kez chick. Absolutely. If anything,
Your mother was an enabler to the,
if anything, it makes her even more sympathetic to the jury because he tried to make something out of, well, why didn't you leave? Why didn't you go back? Why would you stay in if the situation was so awful? What the hell did she have to go back? Where was she going to go? She was stuck between a rock and a hard place, you piece of shit, but well played to point that out to the jury. I hope you're... Ugh.
these things that had happened to you and your sisters.
Yes.
If not a criminal and part of it, right?
Yes.
And now he's got her calling her mama a criminal.
And just
Which-
like George didn't want his child to be around Dave, he wasn't comfortable about his child being around your mother either, right?
Yes.
And you talked about how the Wagners didn't like your family. You said that, right?
Yes.
But it wasn't just her mom and Dave that the Wagners didn't like. It was her sisters too. She was isolated from all of her family. You jackass. So yeah,
All right.
the jury
And
will understand him not wanting his son
back
around
to
his mom and her,
after you
her mom and
George,
Dave.
George had given the relationship or agreed to give the relationship another shot. You guys
I don't. I
lived together.
hold on.
There in the Wagner home.
Would you get to the point with your questions? Jesus fuck! I know you have these things written down. All you gotta do is read them. If you had asked me before Tabitha testified, I would have said yes. I'm not so sure. And the reason that I say I'm not so sure is because on the one hand, it is actually the messages between her mother, Tess, and Hannah Mae that was the catalyst for all of this, according to the state. Okay. But now that this has come out, no, I don't think I would, if I were the state, I would not put her on the stand. And I think that that they don't need her. You have Hannah Mae's own words in the text in the private messages from on Facebook between Hannah Mae and Tabitha here, where they're discussing their experience at the Wagner home. So I don't think that she is necessary, and I would not put her on the stand. Hell no. Okay.
Home, right?
Yes.
Now, there was an occasion where, and I'm not sure what happened, but maybe you can tell us, that George had found you in the bathroom and you were cutting your wrist.
Oh, let's trot out all
Yes,
of her problems. You
And
piece of
George
absolute
had
shit.
taken you out of the bathroom and was going to take you to the hospital. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do, but that's not where he wanted to head to.
I'm sorry?
That's not where he said he was going.
Oh, well,
Oh,
didn't George ask you at that time or suggest that the two of you should leave and go to Alaska then?
No.
You don't recall that?
No, he wanted to send me off to Tennessee with my sister.
Okay, all right. Well, do you recall telling George that it wouldn't be good for Bullvine for us to leave?
He never suggested even leaving.
Okay.
he almost tripped her up there. Well played, Tabitha. You're doing great.
And so you guys end up going back to the house, right?
Yes, because Angela found us and made us.
I'm sorry, what is that?
Yes, because Angela caught up and with us when we were still on the driveway and had us go back home.
And when we talked about
Mm.
George's concerns about you not going or not taking his child to the home of where your mother and Dave live, you had talked about, some distrust. I think that you said George had for you, which prevented you from leaving or having some forms of communication such as through Facebook, right? That was difficult for you.
Without a phone, yes.
Yeah. In fact, it's because you told him, or you will admit, that you cannot be faithful,
I couldn't, no.
which is the reason these restrictions were there, right?
Yes.
In fact, you had told George, well, before I get to that, you would agree with me that on 3 or 4 occasions, you had been visited by BCI agents and you talked to me, right?
Yes.
Were you aware that your conversation was recorded?
Yes.
Okay. And there was some discussion about communications you had with your mother, and you had asked George if you could use his cell phone to call your mother. Do you remember that?
Yes.
But George was at work, right?
Possibly so.
And I believe, would you agree with me that when George got home, that you had just forgot and you didn't call your mother, right?
He wasn't going to let me anyways.
But you just testified that you called him and you asked if you could, and he said, yeah, right?
I did not call them. I was not allowed to be on a phone.
Okay, but you had asked him if you could call your mother on his cell phone, is that right?
Yes.
All right, but then you later forgot to follow up and do that. That's what you told the BCI agent, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we've heard for the last 2 days, what you said about your experience of being married to George and
Exactly, Jennifer.
And
They
living
better.
in the
They are
Wagner
going to have to
home.
start tying. They are got to start connecting these dots.
didn't you say that you had a wonderful relationship with your husband, George?
The first part of it, yes, I did.
All right. Now, So you're telling us that there was an exception. There was some point that this relationship was not wonderful?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we talked about your Facebook messages that you had with Hannah. Do you remember having a conversation with David Jenkins?
Yes.
I'm going to object to.
Okay, grounds?
You're saying I want to.
She's objecting now to Facebook.
Actually, Jen, although okay, so here, this is where this is problematic. First of all, it's the introduction of the what occurred, what she was a victim of when she was a child is problematic for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's the way he went about it is absolutely victim blaming. Okay. And, but the other part that's the other layer that's problematic, right, is the state contends that that what happened is the result of Angela getting it into her head that this was going to happen to Sophia, right? Because Hannah had told a story, and now, okay, that's one layer. But now we have this additional layer of Tabitha. Tabitha is not only saying, yes, that did happen to me, but she provided additional testimony to the effect that there was some type of, for lack of a better word, intervention to do something about Dave, the stepdad. Then you have Tabitha agreeing that her mother enabled Dave to do the things that he did, not only to her, but to her sisters. So this is where it's going to get very sticky because was Angela so far off? Listen, I don't care what I don't care about whether I don't care about any of this. None of this justifies, in my mind, what happened on that day. Okay. But what you definitely don't want to do is start taking away the psycho hose beast element here. And he is by this test, just at this point, this testimony right here that we're talking about, he has chipped away a bit, actually quite a bit, unfortunately, at the psycho hose beast element of Angela Wagner. Like, was she paranoid? I mean, what are the odds? Both of her, for lack of a better, well, Tabitha was legally her daughter-in-law, but Hannah, both of them, you know what I'm saying? You follow me here? So they're going to definitely, the only way to undo all of this and to build the case back is they've got to start tying up these loose ends. They have got to start connecting the dots and getting the jury to getting to a place where they're, come on, placing
Messages.
Wagner
Here's-
in the at the murder scenes, the crime scenes. I really hate this thing. Go away. I don't know why there we go. I probably could have just talked this whole, oh my God. And I don't know how to get rid of this stupid thing. There we go. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Here we go. I don't, let me skip. I kind of want to skip here, but I don't, because I think this is the part where she laughs. And I can't imagine what she's laughing at. Oh, she's laughing at something absurd. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. And thank you, Lawn Crime, for getting to unmute. And I don't remember exactly when they the prosecutor were you see how easily do you see the things that I freaking pay attention to for no reason? There's no reason for me to pay attention to that. She's testifying right now and they have not turned the audio back on and it's going to come on abruptly. So do not turn your volume up. But I don't want to skip it because I don't remember exactly when it comes back on. It's fairly short, fairly quickly here. Yes, yes, yes. You nailed it. Yes, Jen. This is like, okay. We already knew going into this. I swear to God, if you sidebar again, I'm going to lose my mind.
Yes, okay. So I'm going to show you what
Okay.
this document here, if you look at the top highlighted portion, first off, do you recognize what that document is?
Yes.
All right. Now, go ahead and take a moment, look over it, and then and if you want, give it back to me, put it down, and I'll ask you again.
Like we
All right,
knew
I have it?
going into it, this
Are
was
you
going to
able to
be
read that document?
really a circumstantial
Yes.
case.
All right. Now,
But,
are you seeing
bruh,
conversation from somebody by the name of Tabby Breach?
better get
That
some
was me.
circumstances
So,
going
Now
on.
that I have refreshed your recollection, do you recall telling David Jenkins you had a perfect life with your husband?
Yes.
And who you're referring to is George,
Tony, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Bless it. I don't want to talk too bad so they don't they can't try to get me for streaming their stuff.
Now, back to George and living with him, he had
Even though, to be fair, I do
various jobs, right?
fall under fair use
Yes.
guidelines,
For a
but that's
while,
really
he worked at
subjective.
Bennett's in Menford.
Yes.
Okay. And then for some time, he was hauling cattle, right?
Yes.
And when he would haul cattle, he would be gone for like a week on or a week off, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, back to that situation where you had cut your arms. uh, Did you ever seek any help for that?
The only reason I done it was because George and Angela wouldn't shut up and leave me alone about getting back on Zoloft, even though I told them the last time I was on Zoloft, it didn't end well.
Zoloft, okay. So you have been prescribed Zoloft is what you're telling us.
Yes.
And for what reason are you prescribed Zoloft?
For depression, bipolar.
Okay. And you have said, and you would agree with me that you've said that you don't like taking your medication, right?
Not that one, no.
Okay. Any other medication you didn't like taking?
Exactly, Tony.
Legally, no.
Okay, so have you been taking your medication lately?
Lately?
Yes.
What does that matter?
Well, she's testifying here. Have you been taking your medication?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, good for you, Tabitha.
I'm going to ask you about that incident when you had left the Wagner home. If I'm not mistaken, well, first off, you have discussed that incident with the BCI agents, right?
About me leaving or about me cutting my arm?
About the incident when you left. You've been questioned about that, and you told them what happened, right?
Yes,
Would you agree with me, though, that when you talked to the BCI agents, you told them that you and George were playing around?
with the belt, yes.
Okay. And
What?
it's my fault, I don't hear that well. You said what now?
With the belt, yes.
With the belt, but, okay, now you would agree with me that you never told any BCI agent that there was playing with a belt, right?
What?
You never mentioned a belt to a BCI agent, right?
It's part of that night, I'm pretty sure I did.
Okay, all right. But you've always said that it was just the two of you horseplaying or playing around, right?
Yes, at first it was.
Okay, so maybe I misunderstood your testimony on direct examination, but it sounded to me as if you were saying that he was like assaulting you with a belt. That's not true, right?
That's not what I said.
Okay, and I may be wrong, but I'm just making sure that I understood you correctly. You weren't testifying that he was assaulting you with a belt, right?
No, I did not say he was assaulting me with a belt.
Okay, and it was just you guys were playing around, right?
In the beginning, yes.
Okay, and then Angela, I guess, wanted you guys to stop.
Yes, because I
upset.
yelled at her precious baby.
Okay, all right. And you wanted to leave the house, right?
Yes,
And when you went to leave, George had put his arm on the door so you couldn't leave, right?
yes,
Okay. Now, this was in November. You would agree with me, right?
yes,
Okay. And when you left on your bicycle, it was dark, right?
yes.
Okay. And so how much time went by from when you're trying to leave and when you actually fled on your bicycle?
It was dark. I don't know. Maybe
Okay.
an hour?
Okay. So again, it's November, it's dark, and George is trying to keep you from leaving the house. That's what I understand. Right?
Okay, stop acting like George
And
was.
when he had his arm
Hold
the
on a
door
minute.
trying to keep
I'm gonna
you
have to
from
stop
leaving the
you,
house.
sir. I'm fixing. No, no, no. Hey, Pitbull Mama. Good to see you. Welcome. Okay, I'm gonna have to stop you right there, sir. First of all, don't play with these folks out here. Okay? You know damn right well that George was not stopping her from leaving the house because he was concerned for her safety. It was a control issue. All right? She was old enough to understand what the weather in Ohio in November is like, and she still wanted to leave. There is absolutely no reason. Asking somebody not to leave is one thing. Physically keeping them from leaving is another thing. So stop playing with us and stop playing with this jury like we don't know the difference. Like, I know you're grasping at straws here, but you got to stop this. This is just belittles all of us. It makes us all look stupid. Cut it out. So, Pitbull Mama, this is the case of George Wagner the Fourth, Ohio versus George Wagner the Fourth. He is part of, excuse me, the Wagner family, who, along with his brother Jake and his father Billy, are accused of going to the Roden family homes and murdering all 8 Roden family members. So it would have been Chris Sr. and Gary Roden, Hannah Mae, Dana and Chris Roden Jr., Frankie Roden, Hannah Gilly, and then that's all. It's 4 homes, 1 property, and then down the about a mile and a half, 2-3 miles somewhere down the road is the final victim, Kenneth Wagner. And so Jake has already pled guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances. Billy Wagner, his father, is awaiting trial. This is obviously George Wagner's trial. Angela Wagner, the mother, has pled guilty to, I can't remember what all she was pled guilty to, but they're both supposed to testify in this trial for the state against their brother and their son. So that's basically what this case is about. And all on the stand right now is the defendant's ex-wife, Tabitha, who is testifying on cross-examination about the living conditions and how what it was like to live in the Wagner home. Essentially, they functioned as one unit, all for one and one for all, with the so there you go.
Al, that's when I think you said you bit him,
Yes, on the arm.
and then you did something else.
Try to rip his nuts off.
Okay, all right. And so he eventually, I guess, released his arm and you were able to go outside. Is that right?
Yes.
And your testimony was you just wanted to be left alone.
Yes, because I was aggravated and I needed to cry it out and get over it.
Okay. Now, at that time, were you still taking your meds?
You're welcome.
No, I wasn't on medicine at that time.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Amelia. I try.
Now, I believe according to your testimony then that Angela had said, give me a gun or I'm going to get a gun. Is that right?
Yes, she told George that she was going to get a gun.
Okay. And who all was around when that happened?
Well, there was me in the middle of the yard. There was George and Angela on the porch, and Jake was outside fixing his truck.
Okay. And there was Vine, that's your son. He was there, right?
Yes,
And Hannah was there.
yes.
And it's fair to say that you
Oh,
were
thank you,
very
Pitbull.
upset,
I
right?
Pitbull
Yeah,
Mama. I
crying.
appreciate that. I don't want to call you
Of course,
Pitbull. I'm going to
yes.
say the whole
And there was some
handle. Pitbull
discussion
Mama.
about your state
Thank
of
you very
mind and you
much.
shouldn't be holding Vine or somebody wanted to take Vine from you. Is that right?
Yes, Angela wanted to take him from me. She handed him to Hannah and told them to go upstairs with him.
Okay, all right. And you ended up, we heard you went underneath the truck and then you grabbed your bike and you took off, right?
Yes,
Okay. Now, you testified to this threat that you say Angela made with a gun, right?
yes,
And that.
Thank you, Kat. Hey,
I
Chick
believe you
Tracy.
testified that George had struck you, right?
before
And thank you,
all of that other stuff happened.
Kes
Yes,
Chick, for
before
being
I
a
bit him
member
and
for
all
9
that.
months. I appreciate that,
Oh,
babe. I really
But You're
do.
saying that he struck you before you bit him.
Yes,
Okay, all right. And would you have told maybe the BCI agents that after you went outside and he went outside that he then hit you? Would you have told BCI agents that?
yes. That's
Okay.
part of what happened that night.
Okay, so it was you biting him and hitting him before you say he hit you, right?
No, we went outside. I went outside to try to cool off. He came out following.
Okay,
We argued.
Yep.
He told me to stop yelling. My smartass mouth decides to yell louder. So he slaps me. I tell him that he signed his divorce papers. I go back inside and I get my shoes on. I try to go back outside, but that's whenever he decided to trap me in there with his arm.
okay, all right. Well, you know that's illegal. You shouldn't be assaulting people, right?
He shouldn't have assaulted her
Shouldn't be
either.
threatening people with a gun either, right?
Yeah.
And so when you got to the gas station and you
Jesus.
used that cell
Fuck.
phone, at what point were you going to call the police?
I wasn't.
Okay, you weren't, but yet a Adams County deputy had shown up there, right?
Yes,
And after that Adams County deputy had shown up, you ended up getting charged, right?
yes,
Okay. And you testified about being seated in the back of a cruiser, right?
yes.
In fact, you were then taken to the Adams County Jail where you
No.
were released. You were not taken to
No.
the Adams County Sheriff's Department?
No.
Okay. You were charged though, right then?
The cop had me sign some sort of ticket.
You were given a ticket. Now, after you left, would you agree with me that you went to the Wagner home and left a note in the mailbox for George?
A couple days later, yes,
Okay. And the content of that note was that Bullvine could stay with him because you didn't have a place for him, right?
Temporarily, yes.
Okay, you put that in the note temporarily?
Honestly, I don't know what I wrote. That was a lot of years ago.
Okay, but you do remember leaving the note, right?
Yes.
Okay, now, from what we've all heard here.
All right, I'm going to stop you right there, sir. I don't give a rat's fat kneecap what note she put in that damn mailbox 2 days after this incident occurred. Okay, it's clear that whether she used the term or the word temporarily or not, it doesn't matter, because at another point she wanted more. She wanted joint custody of her son, and not like, 2 years later down the road she changed her mind. It was during the divorce proceedings. So stop playing out here, just acting like you have no good sense. Nobody, if you want, if it, there's, why would she have a reason to hide under a truck? If she were being allowed to leave and she could come and go as she pleased, why would she be hiding up underneath the truck and riding her bike down to the dadgum gas station in November in Ohio? Stop it. But carry on. You're just making me, just frustrating me more.
You make it sound like you were the victim, right?
She
Well, I'm not
was.
trying to be a big crybaby, but yeah.
Okay, all right. And so that paper, that summons that you had signed ordered you into the Adams County Court, right?
I have no idea what it did.
Do you recall going to the Adams County Court?
I know after a week or so, maybe a couple days, George had given me the money to pay whatever that fine was, but then he also said that he dropped it.
Yeah, let's not gloss over that so fast.
Oh,
You're aware of the Adams County Courthouse, right?
Yes.
Okay, and a judge, you saw a judge similar to the judge we've had here with a robe on, right?
oh,
During our divorce, yes.
don't do
Okay.
this.
But you went to the courthouse and you pled guilty, right?
No,
You did not plead
No.
guilty. Okay. And so to your knowledge, whatever happened to that charge?
well, he said he dropped it. So you can ask him what happened to it.
Well, I heard you say something about paying money, right?
Yes, it was his fault it happened. He paid for it. He gave me the money to pay for it.
Paid for what though?
How if I know?
I'm sorry?
I do not know.
And who was it that told you?
Yeah, we
that
don't
you
do
were-
all that.
that you
I
were
like, I'll
owed
be
money?
I'll
George.
discuss the criminals drama, but nobody
And
else.
so at no time are you telling all of us
Just
that
so
you
you
ever
know,
had a
Pitbull Mama.
conversation with a court official telling you that you had a fine?
Other than the domestic violence fine that I was supposed to have paid on, he said he dropped.
Okay.
All right, let me stop you right there, because you're just being a dick and you're trying to confuse her. Look, here's the deal, okay? Most states after 1996, with the O.J. Simpson trial, changed the laws insofar that changed the way they handle domestic violence cases, okay? So if a victim calls 911 and the cops arrive, they're going to take one or both parties to jail depending on the situation and the injuries, okay? They do have the right to use discretion. You can have called the cops and said, I'm going to press charges, and also have told your ex-wife here that you dropped the charges, and the state could have picked them up and elected to charge her with a misdemeanor. It's not mutually exclusive. This attorney knows that, and he's just being a dick to be a dick.
But I just want to make sure that what you're telling us is that whatever happened to this case, you're unaware, and all you know is George told you it was dropped, but for some reason you owed fine money, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, tell me, for what reason would you have a fine if the case was dismissed?
I don't know, I'm not a lawyer.
You never asked about that?
No, I'm a blonde.
Okay.
Oh.
I'm sorry, what was
I
that?
said, no, I'm a blonde.
Okay.
Don't do that. Oh dear. I get why she's frustrated though.
Well, do you even remember going to the courthouse?
Your Honor, this has been asked and answered.
I
Repeatedly.
went to some building that George had dropped me off at and told me to pay a fine of some sort.
Okay.
What building it was, I don't know.
Yes, okay. Were you on your medication at that time?
Oh my God.
No, I wasn't on any medication at that time.
There you go.
Despite what
Get
had
you a drink of
happened
water, girl.
down in Peterson, or what was alleged, you're telling us that George is the one who actually took you to court. He drove you there, right?
No. My sister drove me there or around there,
Okay,
and she didn't know exactly where I was supposed to go. So we met up with him, and me and George had driven to whatever building we drove to.
okay, so let me make sure I understand this. Your sister drove you so far, and then you're saying you and George drove another portion, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Not another portion. He probably drove her around the corner to
And
the
so,
other building.
speaking
Stop
of these
playing.
legal proceedings, you had told us that you were in a courtroom at the time of the divorce, right?
Yes, that's where you go to get divorced.
Yes. And so back to your statement that you told George that he just signed his own divorce paperwork, or he just signed his divorce. You remember saying that, right?
Yes.
George is actually the one who filed for divorce.
Yes.
Okay. And you had met with George at his attorney's office,
Yes.
and your mother, and at this time, just so we're clear where your legal standing is, you guys have a child in common, right?
Yes.
Of this marriage, right?
Yes.
And so you're at this attorney's office, and you are told then that you would not have custody, right?
Yes, but it was supposed to be temporary.
Okay. And not only were you told that you would not have custody, but you were told that all visits would be supervised, right?
They weren't supposed to be, but yes.
Okay. And for what reason would you agree to that?
I don't know. He's not
Yes,
the smartest person in the world.
Oh no. See what he's
Or at
doing?
that time in your life,
Let me
would
just
it-
stop
would it
you
have
right
been
there.
more convenient?
Don't be an asshole, attorney. You know why she agreed to it. What choice did she have? She wasn't gainfully employed. So she had no money of her own. She relied on George Washington Wagner IV to support her and her son. You know, she had her back against the wall. Okay. And if you're trying to get the jury to think that this is a situation of a woman scorned because George filed the divorce first, don't be ridiculous. If she were a woman scorned, she would have contested the divorce, and she didn't. In fact, she did what she thought was her only option. She probably didn't even know she could contest it, you jerk, or not even contest the divorce, just contest what was in the divorce. Don't be an asshole. This isn't making you or your client look any better. In fact, I was already sympathetic to Tabitha when we started out. I'm even more sympathetic to her now. And this almost never happens. I usually find some kind of reason to at least give a witness a side eye. But you're just being a jerk.
If you're with another person, that you not have a child in your life at that time?
What?
Well, let me ask you, you and your mother had a conversation, would you agree with me, about Jay, right?
Yeah.
And
maybe.
you were talking to your mother about really being in love with Jay, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And would you agree with me that your mother told you you need to make Bullvine a priority and forget about Jay? Would you agree with me on that?
Sounds about like something my mother would say, yes.
Okay. And would you agree with me that your mother said it's not fair to Vine and that you spend your money that you saved on Jay?
What money?
You don't remember that?
No.
Okay. Do you recall your mother, Patricia Tess Howard, telling you, I'm not trying to be mean or cruel, but what you need to do is stop worrying about Jay and get your shit together for your son? Remember your mother telling you that?
Sounds like her, yes.
Okay. Do you recall your mother telling you he's your first priority or should be?
Sounds like her, yes.
Stop using Jay as a crutch. Remember that?
Not particularly.
Okay. So it sounds to me that your mother is telling you, make your son a priority. Forget about Jay, right?
Yeah.
So I asked you, why would you agree to supervise visits or to not being the custodian of your son? Why would you not fight for that?
Because I had no job and nowhere to live.
Okay. And in fact, I believe that you had told BCI agents that where you did have to live would not be safe for your son. Right?
Yes, that was with my mother.
Okay. But you told the agents that it was because there were a bunch of radio parts around the home.
Yeah, the home was very cluttered.
And it's the home where Dave lives, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I guess it's his CD radio parts?
Yes.
Okay. And you also told BCI agents that Bullvine was safe where he was at with his father.
Yes, he was a lot safer there than he was at my house.
Okay. Now, prior to being able to get that dissolution, you and George, there were some maybe hoops you had to jump through, some things you had to do before you could get that dissolution.
Yes.
And one of those things would be going through like a counseling.
Yes.
You good with that? Okay. And so I'm going to, Aaron, may I approach?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to hand you a document. Do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
And what is that?
This is the certificate of completion,
Okay, and it's a completion for what?
helping children cope with family separation.
Okay. And is that what you had to go through before you could dissolve your marriage?
Yes, it was a class that was maybe a couple hours long, I believe.
And do you recall how you got there? Who drove you?
George?
Okay. And so you guys rode in a car together there, and I'm assuming he drove you home, right?
Yes.
So despite all these things, you guys are still getting along.
For the most part.
Okay. Now, I'm not clear about this agreement. You had to go into a courtroom in front of a judge before you could divorce or dissolve your marriage, right?
Yes.
And when you stood in front of that judge, the judge told you that you were agreeing to George being the sole custodian, right?
Yes.
And the judge also made sure you understood that all visits would be supervised, right?
Yes.
And you were asked if you understood that. And you said yes.
Yes.
Okay. And there was nothing in there about changing these things at a later time, right?
No,
Okay. And so it's fair to say those were your wishes, right? Exactly what the judge had made sure you understood.
no, those are not my wishes. George told me that it was only temporary. That's what was supposed to have been done. And whenever I got my own place and my own job, then I could have him back and would do the 50-50 thing.
Okay, so this sounds like something important that you would want to put in writing, what you're telling me, right?
Yes,
But you didn't do that.
no,
Didn't your mother offer money to hire an attorney for you?
no, she doesn't have money.
Okay, all right. So if your mother comes in here and testifies that she ever offered you money,
Sustained.
okay. And although you're telling us that these are things George had told you would happen or the way things would work out, why didn't you say this in open court in front of the judge?
Because he said that it would take longer to get the divorce done
So
if we
you-
had to change all of the paperwork again.
Okay, but what I'm asking is the judge had asked you, is this your agreement? But at that time, you didn't say, no, it's not, right?
Yes, I did say that.
Okay. If you agree with me that you were asked in open court under oath, did you voluntarily sign the agreement and you said yes?
Yes,
In fact, you were also asked, have you been seeing him? And your answer is yes. Do you remember that?
yes,
And when we say him, we're talking about your son, right?
yes,
And then there's another question, as much as you would like, and your answer is, uh-huh. Do you remember that answer?
yes.
Okay.
What was she going to do? Make trouble?
And after reciting the details of this agreement that
Lord.
George would be the sole custodian, that all visits would be supervised, you were asked, is there anything in the agreement that you are not satisfied with? And your answer is no. You would agree with that, right?
Yes,
Okay. To your knowledge, is your mother prescribed any prescription medication?
What?
Okay, let me rephrase this. There was an incident in which you said that your daughter had tested positive for some type
Oh,
of prescription
no.
medication, right?
yes,
And that is Xanaxes, right?
yes.
And is your mother prescribed Xanaxes?
She's prescribed a lot of medications. I don't know which ones they are.
So is that a no, or you're just not sure?
It's an I'm not sure.
Okay. Now, there was a lot of questions that you were asked about where you were asked about they or them. Let's be clear. Who was it that held your baby the day that you said she tested positive for Xanaxes?
Angela,
Okay. And what time is it that you were at the Wagner home that day?
think around noonish,
Okay. And at what time were you at SOMC?
sometime after 7.
Okay. And so 7 hours later, you're bringing a 6-month-old baby to the ER. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah, but she said she was just for you guys' benefit. And the jury's not, this isn't going to fly, I don't think, with the jury. Just because she was there at 7 o'clock,
Speaking
at
of,
noon.
you would agree with me. that
There's a-
George,
let me
had
push pause.
issues with, again, you being unsupervised with,
All right, here's the deal. He asked her, what time did you get to the Wagners? Noon. What time did you call or arrive at SOC 7 p.m. So 7 hours later. Well, yes, that is 7 hours from noon when she arrived. What he very carefully and strategically didn't ask is, how long were you at the Wagners? What time did you leave the Wagners? Implying that it could have happened when she was back at her mother's house. What a jerk.
Your child.
They looked into it.
Yes.
Could you tell us, there was an incident in which there was peas, vegetables, and they were very hot, right?
Yes, they were not that hot, but yes, they were warm.
And what is it you did with your son's hand in those vegetables?
I let him touch them.
Did you let him touch him, or did you take his hand and put it?
I let him touch them to see that they were too hot for him to eat.
Okay. And there was an incident on a picnic table, right?
No, not exactly an incident. He fell off and I caught him.
All right. And all this time that that you do not have custody of your son, and according to you, you're being denied visitation. It was brought out in the direct testimony that you eventually filed something in the court to obtain custody, right? If I may help you, you were asked whether this was by an agreement or by a court order, and you said court order, right?
Yes,
And so that means that you actually had to have something filed to do this, right?
yes,
Okay. Now, remember back when I asked you about BCI agents visiting you and questioning you? Do you remember that question?
yes,
And the BCI agents were visiting you to talk to you about the Wagners and George, right?
yes,
And isn't it true that it's the BCI agents who told you finally you should go file for custody? You should do this, right?
I'd forgotten about that, but yes,
In fact, you told them, well, I was just waiting to see what you guys were going to do. You remember telling them that?
I could have said that. I'm not sure.
Okay. And do you recall a time that you met with George at a park in Portsmouth?
Yes,
And it's over by the Kroger, right?
yes,
And it was during that meeting.
Yes, nonstop, Mom. It's
your
exactly
son
what
was
he's
there,
doing.
yes,
right? And at that meeting is when you were told that George was going to Alaska.
no.
Okay, so there was no mention.
They said that they were gonna go up there in a few weeks to check it out.
Who was there at the park?
As far as I remember, it was George, Jake, my son, Sophia, and Angela, and someone on Sophia's side of the family.
Okay. And you were told what though about Alaska?
That they were thinking about going up there to check it out.
Okay, all right. So, and I believe your testimony was that you didn't know that they went to Alaska. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay. And about visitation, isn't it true that George had invited you to come up to Alaska to visit with your son?
yes, it is.
And he told you that he would pay your airfare, right?
Yes.
And as well as your daughter, right?
No.
How about, okay, but he was going to, well, I won't argue with you about that, but did he offer to pay for a hotel room for you to stay up there as well?
Yes.
And you declined that?
Yes, I didn't feel like dying.
Oh,
We went through a lot of testimony about Facebook accounts, and we cleared that up a little bit ago, but there were these messages that you had with Hannah. Do you know how those copies were obtained?
Yes.
How is that?
BCI, I assume.
Okay, all right. And you talked about in the Wagner home, the dynamics. do you recall telling BCI agents that when Billy is there, he's the one in charge?
Sort of he is.
Okay, and when Billy's not there, then Angela's in charge, right?
Yes.
You're the parent.
Yeah, I
there at
wouldn't.
that
I
home,
would have
right?
declined also
Yes.
nonstop mom.
But I believe your testimony was that Angela is always the one in charge. That was your testimony on direct, right?
Yes.
Okay, but there's a difference now. You're just now admitting, or you're agreeing that you told BCI agents that when Billy was there, he was in charge, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Billy was very seldomly there, though.
There you go.
And we talked about some of the things that you said you weren't allowed to do at the Wagner home. And you talked to BCI agents as well about some of those things that you weren't allowed to do, right?
Yes.
In fact, there was a conversation about an accusation of you
I did
being,
too nonstop mom.
that you had stolen money, right?
Yes.
And who accused you of that?
Angela.
Okay. And you also said that you did not check the mail, right?
I was not allowed to go to the mailbox.
So do you remember a female by the name of Jennifer Comisford talking to you about that? A
Is that one of
BCI
the
agent?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall being specifically asked by that agent, were you told you could go or you just chose not to?
Honestly, I'm not sure, but I know I wasn't allowed to go.
Okay. So if you had told the agent that you didn't do it to just avoid any accusations, that would be wrong, right?
What is it?
If you had told that BCI agent, I wasn't told I couldn't go to the mailbox, I just chose not to avoid any accusations. You're telling us that would be wrong, right? But you never said that.
I wasn't allowed to go to that mailbox.
What is your
You
point, counselor,
testified about this,
with the respect to the mail?
where you were pulled over by a trooper, is that right?
Yes.
You're not telling us that George is the reason, or George is who called and told them to pull you over, right?
I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying that's more than likely what happened.
Okay, and, I mean, did anybody tell you that he did that?
Well, no, not at all, but his house is the one that I had left.
And who all was there when you left?
George, Jake, and Angela, maybe Billy. I'm not sure if Billy was there.
Oh,
And
Lord.
just hold on 1 second.
No,
okay?
you should have been prepared. I don't want to hold on 1 second. Minus 15 points from Ravenclaw.
Ma'am, I asked you about, let me retrieve this document here, the certificate. Ma'am, I asked you about you not filing for custody until the BCI agent had told you that you should go ahead and do that, right?
Yes.
In fact, you ended up not getting custody until after George was arrested in this case, right?
About 3 months after that, but yes.
Okay. And so I had handed you a certificate. I'm going to have you identify that. I'm going to re-hand you that document. You can just tell me what it is, and you can tell me the exhibit number that's marked on it.
Could you
The
just tell
what?
me what the point of
There's a
asking
sticker
all
on
of
it.
this
Could you
is?
tell
How
me
does
what
this
that is?
absolve George
What
for
number is
any
on
of the
Two?
crimes of which
Okay,
he's been
thank you.
accused?
That's Defense Exhibit 2 that you have in your hand. Got one more thing. I had asked you on cross-examination about
Tony.
conversation that you had with your mother about Jay and your son. I'm going to re-hand this document to you and see if you recognize that.
Okay, we all know that the BCI subpoenaed the Facebooks, and that's how they were able to
Could
get the
take a look at that
Facebook
document.
messages.
Does that appear to be the conversation that you spoke of?
How does any of this testimony put? I don't see how any of this changes anything that she's testified to.
Yes.
This is the worst
And
use
there's
of an
a
impeachment
exhibit
ever.
sticker on there. Could
An
you tell me
attempt
what
at an
number that
impeachment.
is?
For
One?
I should say,
Thank you, and just one more.
no more minutes, bruh.
Recall the questions that I had for you about your Facebook messages and George being perfect.
Yes.
That appeared to be the conversation that you had with Mr. G.
Yes.
And you identified the exhibit number that you
3.
Thank you. That's what it was.
What was the point of that, bruh?
We've been at it for a while now, so we're going to take a recess, 15-minute recess. While we're at recess, the jurors are not to discuss this case among yourselves or with anyone else.
Let me see if they come back with
The case
some
is
rebuttal.
With you or in your presence, not to form or express reports or take a 15-minute.
All right, hang on. Let me see if she gets back up on the stand.
Him not following the way that talking about the Bible. Angela.
Tell us.
Yes.
Okay. First, do you hold Mr. Nash? You
That's it. All right, here we go.
after your mistake.
I'm going to speed her up just a little bit.
Just want to follow up on some questions that you were asked by Mr. Nash. First, you were asked if it was true that when you first started dating George Wagner, you were quite young, correct?
Yes.
11 or 12, is what
Yes.
you said. And at some point, you told Mr. Nash you actually moved into the Wagner residence, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you did not tell us that on direct, correct? When I questioned you,
I don't believe I did.
okay? And do you remember if I asked you that question?
I don't think you did.
Okay. I just thought you dated for the amount of period you did when you were that young, and then you separated, and then later in life you moved in together, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you were asked if you actually slept in the same bed as George that first time when you were 11 or 12. First of all, how old was George at that time?
Around 14, 15.
Okay. And can you tell us, when did that start, that you slept in his bed? Who prompted that?
Angela.
Tell us about that.
George's grandmother Rita was there, and they were talking about the Bible, and his grandmother was saying something about him not following the way that he should be, and I guess it got him really upset, and so Angela said that I should sleep in there and comfort him.
What?
So it was at Angela's behest, her instruction, that you went in to lay and console her son.
Yes.
An 11-year-old.
And I believe you were asked about, earlier in the relationship, you had more freedom of movement. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. But that got progressively worse.
Yes.
Okay. And those were some of the things that you and Hannah wrote and talked about in the Facebook messages that you just identified for us, correct?
Yes.
About how you weren't able to see your parents and your family, and she said to you, well, at least you get to see your family now. And she commented about
Shamita.
that she could see her mom and dad now without them moving out,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Which is also contradictory because when George was, when they were playing the audio from Billy Wagner's interview with BCI, one of his interviews, he made it a point to tell the agents that Chris Sr. was his best friend. So if he were, why would he have any objections to Hannah seeing her parents if one of her parents was Billy Wagner's best friends? See, it's the little things like that that got Billy Wagner caught up.
You were
Jackass.
asked if there was some questions about the paternity of your son, correct?
Yes.
And you said you were not a part of the paternity testing, or that wasn't your idea. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And whose idea was it?
That is something that George and Angela had talked about.
And do you know if they did the testing?
Yes, they did.
Did they ever share the results with you?
I didn't physically see them, but she had told George that my son looks so much like him because he is his.
There was some discussion with you about you and your sister's victimization when you were children,
Yes.
correct? Approximately how old were you when those things happened to you?
It started when I was about 9 and ended when I got with George at 12.
And your George knew that it had also happened to your sisters, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And he knew who the perpetrator was, which was your stepfather, correct?
Yes.
And he knew that your mother was not protective or not wanting to report this to law enforcement, correct?
Yes.
But he also banned your sisters from visiting you, correct?
Yes.
All excellent
You were
points,
also
counselor.
asked if it was understandable that George would not want Bullvine in the same home as a known sex offender and your mother, correct?
Yes.
Did you agree that you also did not want Bullvine in that home?
Yes.
Okay. I believe your testimony is that's why you agreed for Bullvine to go be with George until such time as you had a different place to live, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And again, you were talked to about when you went into the courtroom. First of all, did you meet with his attorney prior to signing the dissolution?
Yes, him and his attorney.
Okay. And had you had conversations with George prior to signing any agreements?
Yes.
Okay. So obviously, there's nothing in the agreement that says it's temporary, but did you believe George when he told you that it was temporary?
Yes,
Okay, so you took him at his word.
yes.
And at that time, were you being permitted to see Bullvine at the time that the agreement was made, basically?
I got to see him a couple of times, I believe.
Okay. And then once the agreement was signed and court was over, that's when you stopped being able to see him until the McDonald's time at Christmas, correct?
Yes.
Which makes sense because
And there
obviously,
was some discussion about,
hold on,
the fact that the court would have gone over that with you.
which makes sense because obviously, which she's, I think, about to get to here, is that George's attorney told him, look, the judge, when we go before the judge for the final signing off on this divorce decree, the judge is going to ask her if you've been letting her see her son. And you don't want her to be able to tell the judge that you're not doing it. That's why it got after the all the I's were dotted and all the T's were crossed and the paperwork was submitted then to the court for finalization. And then the divorce was granted and all that needed to happen was the final filing. That's why after all of that, it was no longer advantageous to George to allow Tabitha to see their son or to be cooperative in any type of parenting program or plan that they had together. You know what I mean? Because this is not rocket surgery, although that other attorney, ugh.
I'm going to hand you, it's been marked as a 12-page exhibit.
Okay, nonstop, Mom.
marked
We
as
might be.
Exhibit
This,
ED12, and it's 14
this is
pages
almost
together.
over.
The first is the cover page, and the last is a certificate. So in between, there are 10 pages. And if you can just look at this briefly to kind of get a context.
Oh crap! There's like another hour. I'm not going to make it another hour, you guys. I'm just going to stop it here because I'm not going to make it another hour. Well, so there you go. That was Tabitha's cross-examination, and that was a tough one. So I'm going to end it for tonight, and I'll see you guys in the morning at 8:50 when court resumes at 9 o'clock. I want to thank everybody for being here. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you to the mods. Appreciate you. Have a great rest of your Wednesday evening. And I think, hold on, I was going to say something. I don't remember what have a great rest of your Wednesday. And I will see you tomorrow morning or if for the morning session of court. And if I don't see you tomorrow morning when I'm live, I'll see you tomorrow night when I'm live to recap. Okay? Good night, you guys. Have a great rest of your Wednesday and have a great Thursday if I don't see you until tomorrow night. All right. Goodbye.